Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Kayfabe Corner. I'm your host with the most tonight, Sensational Sean. My co-host is under the weather in Oklahoma today, so he's not going to make it in this week. So I get the joy and pleasure of interviewing and talking to three lovely women of wrestling that I have met over the years, and a couple of these ladies are very well known in most wrestling circles. Um, One may not be, but I know she's very well known by a lot of the workers and has been around a lot of the boys and men and ladies over the years, and is also a frequenter of Cauliflower Alley. Uh, First of all, we'll bring in the one and only, the sensational, lovely, talented Miss Barbara Goodish from Florida.
Well, hello, Sean. How are you tonight? Good to see you.
I
Good to
I'm
see
good.
everybody else too.
Yeah, it's good. This will be I'm looking for a very entertaining show tonight. It's
Well,
not often that you can get, two or three, especially women together, in a platform like this to talk about their careers and their histories and their trips up and down the road together and things that they went through. Because everybody always seems to focus on the men, and people forget that women have a big part of this business and wrestling history as well. One of them is, I believe, she was the uh, first WWF tag team champions, or when it was still WW. It was either double or triple F. Triple W.
WWF.
WWF. Okay. I know there was a third W in one of them, too.
There
But
is.
Princess Victoria, um, it's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody.
And then our third person here bringing up the squeaky wheel is Darling Darla Skaggs from St. Louis.
Hi, Sean. How are you? I'm glad to be here and be with everybody and talk wrestling.
Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk loads of wrestling. Um, First of all, most people know Barbara's story. Um, Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish's wife, who was tragically killed in Puerto Rico many, many years ago. Um, Not a lot of people may know who Princess Victoria is. Vicky, will you tell us a little bit about you, your career, how you got started, what brought you into wrestling, and that stuff?
Well, me getting into wrestling, I started out as a fan, and I used to go to the Chautauqua Sports Arena in Portland. Started going there about age of 14, 15, and got to know Sandy Bard, Don Owens, a few of the boys, because I was a regular. I used to trade graveyard shifts on Saturday nights with the other girls at Denny's so that I could go to the match, even though the tips were really good on Saturday nights. Um, One day, probably 2 years in, I was probably 16. I quit my job at Denny's. Uh, District manager kind of irritated me, and I was going to the matches Saturday, and I happened to talk to Sandy Barr. I said, I need a job. Well, he put me to work that night, uh, setting up chairs, pulling down chairs, cleaning the arena after the match, breaking down the ring, and then setting up for his uh, flea market on Sunday. That went on for 6, 8 months. And one day Sandy comes to me, and he was running a wrestling school. He says, look, I've got this girl that I'm trying to train in wrestling, but I've only got one girl. Could you kind of stand in with this girl? Well, for about 3 weeks, I helped with training this girl, as her opponent. And then one day she quit showing up. And then about 6 months later, hang on. About 6 months later, I I realized that I was still training in this wrestling school, and I was the only girl. And funny thing was, is Sandy needed me to train with this girl, but he never brought another girl in to train with me. And so I was kind of tricked into wrestling. But by the time I realized that I was tricked into it, I was hooked. You know, and that's basically how I got into it. And Sandy Barr was not an easy man when it came to training. There were literally 4 garbage cans around the side of the ring when we were training, and it was not to pick up garbage. It wasn't if you were going to throw up, it was when you were going to throw up, and are you going to hit one of the 4 garbage cans around the side of the ring. We didn't train, we weren't like the schools today. The schools today, they train once a week, once a month. We trained 7 days a week, twice a day, 2 and 3 hours in the morning and 2 and 3 hours at night. And during my training, I had lived on the other side of Portland, and I had to take a bus to training, and we all know how on time transit is.
Yes.
And Sandy got fed up with me being late, and he says, I want you to pack your stuff up. I want you to move into my extra bedroom. And that was when Art and Sean were like 12 and 14 years old. And I ended up living with Sandy and Sherry.
Wow.
So added to the 2 hours in the morning training and the 2 hours in the evening training, Sandy would wake me up at the late hour of 7 a.m. and he would hand me a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice. And then I had to do the walk, jog, run for 5 miles before training.
Woo.
Wow.
Yeah. It was basically what Sandy did was he did everything he could to make you quit. And if you didn't quit, you became a wrestler.
Yeah, too bad it ain't that way these days.
Well, it would weed out a lot of these wrestlers that we see in the ring today, the ones who keep their hands in their pockets or use their junk to body flip somebody. I won't mention any names, but I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how I got into wrestling. Sandy Barr tricked me into becoming a wrestler.
Wow. So how long before you started traveling and doing, and ending, how did you end up, basically in New York?
Well, first of all, I was in training not for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, not for 3 months, not for 6 months. I was in training almost a year before my first match. In that time, Velvet McIntyre had gotten in touch with Sandy Barr, and she came down to train, and her and I shared the room at Sandy's house. And one day, Sandy left the ring that we were training. He gave us some moves to do and practice. And I happened to look up, and Sandy was in the crow's nest at the Chautauqua Sports Arena talking to Don Owens. And Don Owens was watching Velvet and I train. And within about 3 months of that time, we had wrestled in Idaho, Canada, Idaho for Ed Moretti, Canada with Al Tonko, and then we came full time for Don Owens. And I'd say 6 to 9 months later, which was an unusually long time for a woman to be in a territory, Buddy Rose had actually helped me with Don Owens. Velvet and I were wrestling, each other. And there was an 8-man over the top battle royal going to be in my hometown of Salem. And all of a sudden, me and Buddy Rose, and this was right after the big Buddy Rose Piper feud, which Buddy was the top heel in the Pacific Northwest at the time. Everybody loved to hate him. But Buddy and Rick Oliver, Tommy Rogers, uh, Matt Boren, Stan Stasiak, and there was a couple others I can't remember right now. Buzz Hacksaw Sawyer. I was in an 8-man over the top battle royal, and I was the second one, the second to last person out. I was the last one in the ring with Buddy Rose. And we worked that angle. Him, Rick Oliver, and I worked the angle for about 3 months. And then one day, Sandy came to me and he said, look, he came to me in Belleville. He said, look, I've done all I can. I can't get you booked like you need to be booked. You need to be working full time. And the only way to do that is if I send you to Moolah in South Carolina. Well, about a month later, Velvet and I got on a plane and we went to South Carolina. And Moolah Moolah charged us $1,000 each because we needed more training, which she never stepped in the ring and did. I was trained, when I went there, I was trained by Judy Martin, Joyce Grable, Lord Leilani Kai, and probably the most wonderful woman I've ever met in my life, Donna Cristantella. And once we were there about 3 to 6 months, all of a sudden Velvet and I were doing Madison Square Garden in New York.
Wow.
Right.
So you guys literally went from training in Moolah's area to all of a sudden, here you are, here's Madison Square Garden.
Well, we were on the road at some small shows to start with, in that 3 to 6 months. But it wasn't a very long time at all before I went to Japan. Velvet went to Japan. I did a tour with Wendy Richter. We stayed out 9 months. Left South Carolina, went to Japan. From Japan, went to Puerto Rico, Trinidad, Santo Domingo, back to Japan, and then we landed in Texas. And that was 9 months later. After that tour with Wendy, Velvet and I became a tag team, and we started doing the tour. Well, actually, no. Me and Sabrina became a tag team first, and we went to Louisiana where we got the belts from Joyce and Wendy. They won them back a couple of weeks later. Then when I got back to South Carolina, all of a sudden it was Velvet and I were a tag team. And that's when we started doing the tour with Joyce Grable and Wendy Richter. And yeah, we went basically straight to Madison Square Garden.
Wow. Where did you guys win the straps at?
We won them at Madison Square Garden, on a semi-main event. And
wow.
We kept them until I broke my neck about 1.5 years later.
Yeah, I remember you guys had them for quite a while.
Yeah, I think we had them about 1.5 years before I broke my neck.
Wow.
It was crazy.
That's a hell of a quick run, really.
Yeah. Well, I did a lot. I can't remember being at home more than a week at a time. And when Velvet and I were working for Don Owens, we wrestled 6-7 nights a week. If you got a day off and you thanked the good Lord and you went home and you just slept. If we got a day off on the weekend, we thought we were highfalutin then.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've wrestled a lot of Wendy and Judy Martin and did you ever wrestle Moolah?
Oh yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we wrestled in fact I wrestled her twice, I believe, for her world belt. I lost, of course, but I did wrestle her twice.
Right now, if you get into statistical, I think she was like, in theory, is probably the longest reigning woman champ that they've ever had. Wasn't
Uh,
she like champ for like 4 or 5 years?
Moolah, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it. She held the belt off and on for a total of about 40 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Jeez.
She lost it to Wendy Richter. She lost it to Velvet McIntyre in Australia after I broke my neck and was out of the business. She lost it to Sue Tex Green in Texas in the 80s, early 80s, and she always ended up getting it back.
Wow, that's just crazy.
It was a crazy life. You know, I can't remember. The only reason I even had a place at Moolah's was so I had somewhere to, leave my other clothes that weren't in my grip when I was traveling.
Wow. And you guys got charged continually for that, whether you were there or not.
Oh, hell yeah. You don't
Yeah.
think Moolah was going to let us leave that? This is one thing that gets me. In 1980, in her houses, there was anywhere from 2 to 4 women living in each one of these houses. Whether you were there or not, each girl paid her $300 a month for the for for those houses.
Right.
So you figure it out. 1980, and for one of these rundown shacks that she got from Fort Jackson and put on her property, she's making $1,200 a month for people who aren't even there most of the time.
Wow.
Oh,
That's crazy.
her name was perfect, Moolah, because that's all she thought about was money.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think Mae Young was way underrated in, in comparison.
I agree. There were several women that were way underrated. I mean, and that's something about Moolah that really agitates me to this day is she had some of the best women wrestlers in the world in her camp. And even into her 80s, she kept the belt instead of passing it down. You know,
Yeah.
we can start with the great screw job that was done on Wendy Richter. You know, she didn't have any common sense. She had Joyce Grable, Wendy Richter, Leilani Kai, Sabrina, Candy Malloy. I can go on and on and on about the great women wrestlers she had, but
But refused to get out the belt.
yeah, refused to get out of the ring and let the girls go. You know, she could have sat home and just, cash checks. And women's wrestling would have been in a whole big different place than it got to.
Right.
You, you know,
Exactly.
she held on to the belt so long that the belt became nothing.
Yeah, it killed its prestige.
Absolutely correct.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy. Because I remember a good 10-year kind of gap, roughly, in the mid 80s to mid 90s, where you really didn't have much because by then the women's division had just kind of been fizzled out by people like Moolah and whatnot that were just too much on having all the control. So there was no storylines or anything to
Right.
continue to switch and revolve around.
Well, she let her ego get in the way of her business sense. basically is what happened. And the girls, now that I'm back in touch with them 30 plus years later, the girls, they got tired. They got tired of not getting the paychecks they were supposed to get. They got tired of Moolah being the champion and paying $300 a month rent for a house they're not even in. They got tired of getting screwed
Yeah.
and they quit. Velvet Velvet has still has a nasty taste in her mouth where wrestling is concerned. I've asked her several times, to come to one of the shows, to do signings, her and I together, and she flat says no.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people like that. One of your good friends, I'm sure, Al Madrill, is from Portland. Is same way. He just, people have tried to get him to do meet and greets or signings or anything, even to make money for him, and he just is like, nope,
I'm
wants
done.
wants nothing to do with it.
Well,
His
well,
famous quote is, "Al Madrill is dead."
right, right. And Velvet McIntyre is dead because of the way she was treated. Velvet should have been a champion, a world champion, and not for 2 weeks in Australia.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
should have carried the belt. Wendy should have carried the belt. Leilani should have carried the belt. All those women I mentioned were fantastic wrestlers, and they weren't TNA. Yes, they had great bodies, but they weren't that crap that Vinny started with the bra and panties matches. And
Yeah.
one night, and this is when I quit watching the WWE. I was up late and happened to turn my TV on to the WWE, and they're in Kuwait, and Triple H was playing Santa Claus, and they were wrestling in front of our troops, which I thought was really cool. And they kept talking about this contest. There were three girls going to come out, and I can't remember their names to save my soul. But there were three girls who were going to be in this contest, and whoever won the contest was going to be Santa's little helper with Triple H. Well, I'm thinking contest. I'm thinking a wrestle off. These two girls wrestle. The winner of this one wrestles the third girl, and whoever wins that match gets to be Santa's little helper. So I'm interested. I'm gonna sit down. I want to see what's going on. And out come these three girls to the ring. They've got these cute little Santa jackets on, which that's great because we all had cute little jackets. But when they took their jackets off, I guarantee you could see smoke coming out of my ears. They they had three triangles and butt floss on.
Yeah.
And they didn't, when they got in the ring, they didn't wrestle. They started to dance. And the only thing missing was the pole. And I almost lost a 55-inch DLP because I wanted to put my foot right through the TV or pull an Elvis and put a bullet through it. And from that day forward, I have not made any attempt to watch the WWE.
Wow, Barbara, you went around a lot and whatnot. Did you see a lot of the same issues in other areas where Frank was working and stuff with the females and or lack of female wrestling?
He kept me at home. I hardly ever saw one of his wrestling matches. So that's why he was always the family man and the wrestler. So I probably only went to about 5, 6 matches the whole time I knew him because it was a separate dude. The one match I did see, which I'm so happy about, was it was Ric Flair and Frank in St. Louis, and that was done from the for the Japanese, and they went 1 hour. It was I think even people still talk about it today. It was one of the greatest matches because the Japanese were there, and as you know, the Japanese wrestling is a lot different from the American wrestling. You had to work. I mean, it was really work. It was wrestling probably at the purest form from what we were used to in the States. So you asked that question. The girls, I very rarely, I don't even think I even saw a girls wrestling match on TV that sometimes he'd watch. He'd do research and they would pop up. But like you said, in those days, it was so much different than what it is today. In fact, I went to, we had a wrestling match. Well, it was one of the AEW when they first started, and they had a big wrestling match. And Jim Ross gave me tickets. Didn't think I was going to be in the front row. That was probably the only time I've ever been in a front row to watch a wrestling match. But as you were talking about, what is this? I thought I'd gone to Circus du Soleil. I mean, quite incredible. But my gosh, the flips, it was I was like, what's happening from today? I think one of the old school wrestling being discovered from the young ones because back in those it was entertainment, but it was a real sport in those days. There were big guys that could actually do things. This one was, I mean, it was a fantastic show. Don't get me wrong. It was it was a show, but it wasn't wrestling. I couldn't see the wrestling because there wasn't any storylines.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. Uh, I tell you, some of the things that I've seen over the years are just so much different. Um, and all three of you are connected to St. Louis in one way, shape, or form, because you've all either been there or wrestled there or know people that have wrestled there. So here in just a minute, oh come on, you're killing me, Smalls. I'm waiting for our surprise. Our surprise. I have a surprise for you three. Hopefully here momentarily.
Oh no, this is scary.
I have a suspicion, but not sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure Barbara's definitely got it.
I don't have
Darla
any
probably.
idea.
Darla probably knows too. Um,
I don't, but whenever you get done or whatever, I do have a few things I'd like to say about St. Louis and the ladies wrestling there.
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Tell us while we're waiting for the
So,
guests to come in.
Yeah.
okay, so we all know that the promoter in St. Louis was Sam Mushnick. There will never, ever be
Mhm.
another man like him. And he did not have women's wrestling often because he felt that seeing the women wrestle was a special added attraction. So when he did have women on the card, he had Vicky wrestled there. She knows he had the best women out there. And I'm going to tell you, those women that were in St. Louis and wrestled, they worked their butts off just as well as any of the boys ever did, and sometimes better. St. Louis loved women wrestling back then. And Vicky, you were part of that because I remember.
And that's where the stories are.
Yeah.
Hold on, something happened. Okay, Vicky, we're not hearing you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, your mic went goofy. Play with your Dollar Tree. I know I have those too. It was working. There we go. Oh,
Oh, no.
no. I thought we had it.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh,
Oh,
now she's gone.
now we really lost it.
Hey.
She'll probably do the same thing that I told you to do. Hopefully.
I hope so.
In the meantime, here's our special guest.
Herb!
You was gonna be Herb.
How did you know? How did you know that?
Because
I didn't have any idea.
I did, because you in St. Louis and wrestling, that's the first person I thought of. I so hope it's Herb. Just to see him and say, love you, man.
Man, I love you and all of yous, and I was honored to be asked to take part of this round table. I'll tell you, I'm surrounded by beauty.
There you go.
I miss you, Herb.
Well, I miss you and got Princess Victoria on here. I'll tell you, I feel fortunate.
It's been way too long since we've seen each other. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's still not, Vicky.
well, I was
Keep playing with your doohickey. It'll work.
I switched over here. I was on a virtual signing with Dory Funk party,
Oh,
and
Oh, nice.
I hung up from them to jump over here.
Boy, you are one busy guy.
Well, you know how that goes. But anytime the ladies call, I have to go. You know that. So how's everybody doing?
We're doing good.
Good, just missing everybody. That's why it's
Oh
nice to
yeah.
see everybody. It might
Yeah.
not be touching, but at least it's just seeing people.
Yeah. I
We were
interviewed a young man today, Barbara, and we talked about you and Frank. He is almost a clone of Larry Matisek. He's a young man down at Dory Funk's training camp, and he's a young man, and he's got a degree in film and video, and he's read all of Larry's books except for the one you and Larry wrote. And in the interview I did with him, he said he hasn't been able to bring himself to read it yet. Um, I mean, this guy he knows more about Larry than I do. I think he's just studying, his journalism. And if there was ever a clone of Larry Matisek, it's Chris McMahon.
wow.
I'll have to see if he's a friend. If not, tell him to friend me.
Yeah, I will. Nice. Yeah, I met him a couple of weeks ago in Jackson, Tennessee, at the ballpark for Jerry Lawler's 50th anniversary. Dory and Marty was there and introduced me to him. And as soon as he walked up, I mean, he's kind of small like Larry and got that baby face smile. And so I did an interview with him. It'll be on our Sunday night show that we do live on Facebook. But we talked about Frank and just everything I asked him about St. Louis wrestling, he knew it. So
wow, that's pretty impressive, especially for a young guy.
yeah, young guy. So Darla, everything going okay with CAC?
Yep, everything's going great with CAC. Learning a lot more about CAC than what I knew before. I've been a member since 2004, and it's always just kind of been me getting to go out there and hang out for a few days with my friends, and it's still that, but now that I'm working with them on the benevolent fund, I'm finding out more and more exactly what it's all about. And let me tell you, it is a wonderful organization, and it's been a couple of things have been very emotional for me because you know how I get hurt. But CAC is doing a fantastic job in helping out people that are in need.
What did you see that picture I posted late last night of you and said
I did.
I think this young lady was born at a wrestling match.
I know you always say that, but I was actually 6 months old,
Well, that's my story. I get to tell it the way I want to.
Yes, and thank you for posting that. I've had a lot of messages and comments over that.
Well, I love the CAC and missed it this year, but hopefully we'll all get together next year. And they do such a great job. I got to interview Brian a few weeks back on our show, and we talked a lot about it. And I've noticed a lot more active work on the social media with Bob Cook, which I
Bob
think
Cook is phenomenal.
yeah, he's doing a great job getting the word out there, and I think that's what we have to do.
Yes.
Also, Darla may know about this, may have more info. I'm not sure because it's been a week or two. I was on a signing a couple of weeks ago. With actually, it was the ColleaCon deal they just did a few weeks ago, and
Yep.
Mark Henry and Brian Blair were on there, and Mark basically convinced Brian that they were going to start looking into getting some scholarship type sponsors of some kind to bring more basic seed money to the benevolent fund, which is something that CAC's usually kind of not done over the years. But Mark had looked into it and found some ways to do it to where they can get like a bank or some kind of big corporate company that would, donate X amount to the benevolent fund each year. Did anything come about that?
No, I heard Mark talking about that on the ColleaCon. However, I'm sure that he's discussing it further with Brian and with the board, and I've not heard anything else on that, but I'm sure I will eventually.
Well, I'm going to tell
I
you,
think,
if Mark Henry walked into the bank that I was the president of and wanted some money, I'd give it to him.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. Right before you got on, Herb, we were talking about Vicky's career initially, and then we started to get into women's wrestling in that time, and whatnot. And Darla brought up a really good point about when women's wrestling was going in those times. Guys like Herb Mushnick and whatnot, Sam Mushnick, excuse me, um, would have would only have like women and or midgets. And
Correct.
in my case up here, we had women and midgets, and they only brought them in for certain shows because it was something different, and it meant something more to the card. It was like a special piece. Can you talk on that as well as your experiences as well?
Well, I can probably talk about it a little bit since I'm probably the oldest. Probably none of you remember back when wrestling first started in St. Louis. The ladies that they had wrestling actually wore bathing caps when they wrestled,
Nope,
and
I
that
didn't
was
see that.
way back in the early days. And it
Wow.
only lasted for a short time. Um, a lot of people didn't realize that when wrestling in St. Louis at the Chase started in 1959, it was actually on Channel 5, KSDK affiliate. And again, it was only on there for about a year before it went to KPLR Channel 11. But you're right. Lord Littlebrook was one of the mainstays. And of course, when I got started into it, he was the one I used, and he had the boys, Cowboy Lang and Little Tokyo, and they were a novelty type act. I kind of done it differently. When I was booking them on a regular basis, I tried to use them as much as possible because they would actually, and it was actually Roger's suggestion. I'd put them out there in the opening match a lot of times, and they would set the stage for the whole night. The same way with the ladies. Sam would bring the ladies in as a special attraction, and he found out early on back then that putting the ladies on the card actually helped put some butts in the seats.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and that's why they would, the smart promoters in those days would do that because it would help fill seats, and it would like create sellouts and stuff for certain like times of the year
Oh
as
yeah.
well. Christmas
Well,
showcases, things like that.
I still have those tapes from wrestling at the Chase when the ladies were on there. and I get them out and look at them because, like I said, even nowadays when I play them, when we had the show on Charter Cable out of St. Louis, when we would put one of those special episodes on with the ladies on it, we'd always get a good review on it. Yeah, Sam was pretty smart about doing that.
Yeah. T- um, tell us a little bit about your history and some of your fondest memories in St. Louis. You're going on almost 5 decades now.
Well, some of the fondest memories I got is meeting people like Barbara Goodish and Darla, just the great people that I've met. In this business, you have what are you call friends, and then there's family, and then there's true family, and we have all developed that true family, and the common denominator is the business. I make no bones. In fact, if I could show you, my house is kind of decorated up after Bruiser Brody. My dog, my four-legged Belgian Malinois named Brody. I just Tony Atlas just drew me a picture of me and Bruiser Brody that he just mailed me today. It's on its way here. But guys like that, you don't find the guys like Frank Goodish. And when I first met him, I was petrified of him because I'd heard all the horror stories, and Barbara and I had talked about that. But the man gave me respect, and I was a mark myself back then, and a promoter. Just hey, I'm gonna set the world on fire. It'll be 48 years this coming February that I've been doing it, but because of people like him, of course, my great friend Larry Matisek, and introducing me to Sam Muchnick, I was a young man at the right place at the right time, and they introduced me to so many of them. Some of the females that I had working, Debbie Combs or Mom Cora, Donna Day, Candy Devine, who I just got to reunite with a couple of weeks ago in Jackson, Tennessee, at Jerry Lawler's 50th. Dick Murdoch, Crusher Blackwell. Um, I told Barbara, you'll get a kick out of this. I told the story to that young man I was talking about earlier, the Wrestling at the Chase book, the first one that Larry did. The picture of on the cover is Sam Muchnick and Frank holding up the trophy. And I'll never until I die, probably. Of course, I won't remember it. But we're walking into the Fox Theater, the fabulous Fox Theater in St. Louis, and this would have been in 1987, I believe it was. It was Sam, Frank, Larry, and myself, because Frank wanted to go see the venue. And when we walked in the front door, Sam asked Larry, he said, "Oh, did you pick the trophy up?" And Larry and I stopped because, this was a big show, the biggest show that I'd ever been a part of. I mean, Jerry Blackwell, Kamala the Ugandan Giant, the Midgets was on the card, the Fantastics, Gentleman Chris Adams, and of course Bruiser Brody. And Larry looked at me, and I looked at him, and we had forgot to order the trophy for 24 hours later. And I'll never forget, Frank looks over, and there's this huge ashtray sitting alongside of the pillar as you walk in the door. And Frank could tell that Larry was going to be in trouble with Sam. And Frank just says, there's our trophy over there, and walks over and picks it up. And that is actually the picture on the front page of the cover of that book. A lot of people don't know that. So, but Frank was very good at the last minute. The show we did at the Fairmount Park racetrack, the local TV announcer that was helping us to promote it said, "We need to do something unique, something that will catch the fans' eyes." And lo and behold, it is still out there circulating in the magazines today of Frank with a jockey on his back carrying him down the track racing a horse. Those are ideas Frank Goodish had. It wasn't Herb Simmons or Larry Matisek. It was Frank Goodish.
What?
Yes. Very, very intelligent man when it comes to stuff like intelligent about everything. But if you wanted an angle shot or something to get the fans' eyes, call Frank Goodish, Bruiser Brody, and get him involved. And he, I mean, the being on the front of the St. Louis Checker Dome,
Yeah.
that was Bruiser Brody's idea. King Kong Bruiser Brody. That's how he came up with it.
Wow. Yeah, I over the years I've noticed that uh, several people have stated over the years that there was a number of times where uh, they would give territories would give Frank the book uh, for certain times and whatnot. I know he held it. He did Fritz's for a while. I don't know if he did your guys's or whatnot. I know a lot of the different territories would have Frank write their books because he was that brilliant of a mind for the business.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And he won my respect early on. I was involved with the South Broadway Athletic Club in St. Louis with my friend Tony Costa, and Tony always wanted to bring Frank over there, and I would call Frank, and I remember calling him. I said, "Look, hey, Tony wants to book you over here," and of course Frank knew what we were doing there because I always kept him informed, and we were selling the place out once a month. I mean, no problem. And Frank said, he said, Herb, why do you want to spend the money on me? He said, you're packing the place in there. He said, you're not going to put any more butts in the seats. He said, save that money for when you got a place where you want to pack it, and I always respected that. He could have took the money and been happy with it, but he didn't do that. So to me, right there, out of all the horror stories that I had been told about him, I didn't believe any one of them after that.
Wow. Barbara, can you now tell us a little bit about um, the your visit to Japan shortly after? I believe shortly after Frank died, you went to Japan and did some flowers and things over there.
Well, what they did, they called me just a little bit after everything happened, and they wanted to do a memorial show over there. And Jeff was meant to be starting school, but I thought, well, this is pretty important. Maybe I'd never visited Japan. He always told me about Japan and how wonderful the people are. And I thought, well, at least I could get to kind of see how he felt over there. Because he said you just wouldn't believe the difference between the wrestling over there, like I mentioned before, and the wrestling in the States. So I got Jeff out of school. I think we were there for a week or something. And they were going to put me to fly from San Antonio, I think it was, to Dallas to Japan. I told them, no, I want to go from San Antonio to Los Angeles to Japan because that was the way he traveled every single time. I wanted to go the same route that, he traveled. And we got to Japan. I met Mrs. Barber, was very kind to me. Barbara was kind to me. They put me up in a hotel. They just treated me so kindly over there. And I had Stan. Stan Hansen was with me on the trip too. So he was kind of, it made me comfortable because I had Stan with me the whole time. And Jeff just loved it. I mean, even though I didn't quite understand what it was all about, they gave him, I had an interpreter, and they gave Jeff his own interpreter. I mean, another one of the office boys they gave to Jeff. Well, I had to get on them because every time Jeff went into the shop and he wanted something, they bought it for him. And I was saying, hey, I got to try to get all this stuff back home again. What are you doing? You can't do that. Jeff's little guy couldn't speak English, and Jeff couldn't speak Japanese, but they could communicate. All Jeff would point to something, and sure enough, go and buy it for him. And the show itself was absolutely incredible. You've probably seen some of the tapes out there that they taped. I mean, going in there, I mean, it was just overwhelming. I think at this point, I still wasn't actually believing everything that had happened. I was still kind of in that kind of probably unbelievable stage. You just go through this whole stage where you do things and you don't really know what you're doing. I didn't remember things for a long time. As time went by, you start to remember, different things that you forgot about after everything happened. And I remember that show, and I remember they had all these flowers. I mean, the Japanese are very into the culture as flowers when somebody dies, and all. And I can remember everybody came through. I was by the ring. They all came through, and they had a big picture of Frank, and they would all put a flower down. Well, everybody had done it. Then at the last, Jimmy Snooker came out. He walked out by himself, stood there because Jimmy and Frank had a very close relationship. I don't know how many people know that, but they did have a very respectful. They respected each other, and he came out by himself. Was there for a while. I mean, the crowd just went crazy because he just stood there, looked at Frank, kind of stayed there, and then put the flower. And then they did the whole memorial in the ring where they do the 10-bell count. And I think at that time, Baba was in there for a while. I think he stayed there, if I remember, the whole time, and I had to carry his picture around. And Jeff was only 7 years old. I don't think he really understood, everything that was happening. So, and then of course they gave chain. See, it's like they gave me the chain, and then they wanted me to go outside the ring after they had the 10-bell count and to give the chain to Stan. It was like giving him whatever you say, taking the one right and me handing it to Stan. And I can just remember that the crowd, and then I know. So me and Jeff did sit on the front side. That was my second. No, I have sat in the front row twice now that I remember. And they sat me down in the front row, and we watched a couple of the matches and that. And then we went back to the hotel. And the next night, I remember they took us to the circus. Stan took Jeff to the circus. And they took him backstage. And when I got to see Jeff again, the clowns had painted him up like a clown. I was like, what is this? So I said, just little memories. And the thing I was so happy about, and this is terrible to say, there was a McDonald's by the hotel because I couldn't get my son to eat anything. What am I going to do? How am I going to get him to eat? Because different food over there. And there's a 7-year-old. And I remember leaving the hotel and just walking, food for him. Terrible to say.
Yeah, you need a kid to eat, just feed him McDonald's.
Yeah, but I would have to say that it was a trip. I'm glad I did it just because the fact I found out what he felt when he was over here and how the people respected him and how they looked up to him. And even today, 32 years later, they still contact me. I still have Japanese people contact me. And it's really amazing. It's really amazing that 32 years later, everybody still remembers. And I think what happened is the younger generation who was not around in those days are finding all these YouTube matches, and they're saying, this is great. This is, I don't know what it is. They really bond to these matches and the hardcore that used to be. Because I've been to a lot of these conventions, and I'll have them coming up to me. And when I ask them their age, they weren't even born when all
yeah.
this happened. And they have tattoos of Frank on their arm and different parts of their body. And it's like, and these were people, like I said, that would never have seen him wrestle, didn't even know about him because they weren't born. So it really amazes me
the legacy that he still has.
That he has left, and the memories that people, they'll write to me, they'll message me, and a lot of them still remember meeting. And this is 32 years. They remember seeing him in like the airport and that. And they remember, because they was kind of scared. Solid, here's this huge big guy with the hair out and the beard. And if he saw them that were kind of a little afraid, he would go over and he would kind of talk to them. And a lot of them have actually said to me that they realize that you can't judge a book by a cover. You can't judge people by their appearances. It's what's in here that matters, not what's out here.
Yeah, I still today remember, watching some of those old matches, and how I got to see Frank, what was mostly through World Class, because in that day and age, they were one of the few. I think you had World Class, you had NWA on Saturdays, and you had occasionally you'd have a little WWF. But I remember watching World Class, and seeing Frank, and you would watch him walk through the crowd, and it was like he was this giant compared to everybody else sitting there. And I could just picture myself sitting there watching this giant of a man, and he had that grizzly, like, look on him, but you would see him outside of that, and some of the interviews that he would do were just like so calm and cool. And then some of the interviews, he could just be that, like, I'm gonna rip you in half. And you could just see the difference in how he was, and how gentle of a giant he was, a true gentle giant.
Oh, I know. I saw some of the tapes of the matches in Japan because he would bring them home. They'd give him the tapes and he'd bring them home, and then he'd kind of go through it and critique it. And you'd say, well, I could have done this better. The one thing, because if you see some of those things, when he's in Japan, he's going through the crowd, you know, his chains going around, and the people are just disappearing. You know what I mean? They just, and I said,
Scattering.
yeah, that's a good word. Yeah. And I said to him, I said, aren't you scared you're going to hit somebody? I said, here you are, this chain is twirling around. He said, woman, I'm 6'5". My arm is up here. I'm looking down on everyone. You think anybody's, I could hit? And I realized, yeah, here you are, you're 6'5". Your arm's already up here. What's that, another 2 feet or something? And then you're twirling this chain around your head. Of course, of course. It didn't matter where he did that. It was taller than anyone. He didn't have a fear of hitting anybody. But I remember saying that to him, and it was like, because it was like, this looks so dangerous.
I don't know what happened to Herbie. He just like poofed.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, he was so excited to be with us, and then he's gone.
And I messaged him. I got nothing back. He's still on, but he just like bloop.
So, Sean, I got to tell you something, because you are going to find this really kind of odd, but everybody that's around the wrestling business that knows me knows that Barbara is one of my dearest friends. I call her my partner in crime. She says I corrupt her.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get to spend a week with her in a couple of weeks, and I'm so excited. But do you know that I was not ever friends with Frank, and I only met him a couple of times? And how I actually met Barbara and we became such good friends is through Larry and Sam. I met Barbara at the first book signing that her and Larry did after they wrote the book together. But Frank was always kind of a loner. He didn't really hang out with the wrestling fans, and he didn't hang out in the bar. I guess he was a good boy. I don't know what he was doing, but he didn't hang around with us. But the first time he was at Wrestling at the Chase, I was friends with David Von Erich, and I was giving him a ride to the airport. So David came out and he got in my car and he says, Darla, if you don't mind, he says, can you pull down the street? He said, there's somebody else that needs a ride and we're not supposed to be seen together. And I'm like, oh, great. So I pull around the corner and all of a sudden I look in the rearview mirror and I see King Kong Brody walking down the street. And I'm like, oh my God, scared me half to death. But he gets in my car, very sweet, very calm. He says, hi, I'm Frank. And I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Darla. And that was probably maybe one more time other than that did I ever even talk to him. Isn't that weird?
Wow.
Yeah, I never had the opportunity to get to know him because Herb and Larry, they kept him all to themselves. That's what I'm thinking. But I have heard, I mean, through the years, people talk, especially people in the wrestling business, and you hear horror stories about everybody. And well, not everybody, but most of them. And I've heard different people say bad things about Frank, but I'm going to tell you something. I don't believe any of them. For one thing, if Frank got your respect, he respected you back. And Larry Matishik, Sam Mushnick, and Herb Simmons, they have nothing bad to say about Frank because they respected him. He respected them, and that's all I need to know. I don't need to know what anybody else thought about him.
Barbara, that brings me. Darla just mentioned something there. Um, my question: Do you remember uh, the match that a lot of people talk about, famous in world class to a degree, because it was kind of a floppy disaster, they say. The match that Frank had with Lex Luger. Did Frank ever mention that?
Not well. I think what it was when he went. I mean, now everybody knows what goes on, so it's not. Yeah, I think it was set up. Everything was fine. Well, I think Lex wanted to kind of showboat a little bit. Well, you didn't do that with Frank in the ring. If you showboat, because he would give what he did. If you listen to him, he would make the other person look good. He could actually put, even what he would work with the other person, but you had to him. And I think what happened, uh, Lex kind of went off the script a little bit, so to speak. And that's when the whole fiasco happened.
Frank was teaching him a lesson. I've heard that from a lot of people that Frank basically took liberty because he had basically exactly that. It went off script or whatever and wasn't doing what he was supposed to. So Frank laid some into him and made him learn respect.
Yeah, because I've heard other people. He said some of my best matches have been with Frank. So of course, the ones get into the ring. Johnny Mantell, he's told me stories. If he would take the younger ones under their wing and try to help them. But if you didn't want help, well, then you got the other Frank or the other person. Because even Dugan, Hacksaw Dugan, same thing. There were several people that kind of he took under his wing and kind of helped them along. And I think it was Frank, if I remember, that got Dugan with the 2x4. Because I think they were walking to the ring one day or walking to the ring. And that's what Frank would do with interviews and with going to the ring. He would, as he's walking to the ring or if he's in the building, he'll look to see, what can I use tonight? And that's why he picked up some crazy things and incorporated it into the match. And I think that Dugan, there's a 2x4, go incorporate, do that into the ring. And I think it stuck because I saw Dugan, I think it was the last show I went to, which was in Charlotte. I met him and his wife, and he was telling me stories and that because I'd never met him. I'd heard so much about him because Frank talked about him. So it was really nice meeting him in person.
Herb, do you have any good crazy stories about some of the things that Frank would do in creativity and coming up with angles at the last minute?
Well, as I said, he was very instrumental in putting in great finishes. One of the things that he'd always say when he'd show up to the event, when he'd get there, he'd say, "Hey, big boy, what do you want tonight?" And I always say, you're asking me, you're the star. And I just, send him home happy. And that's all I'd have to tell him. And of course, I've always been fortunate to have Larry right there. We were joined at the hips, and he had the mind. And then when you had the likes of uh, Bruiser Brody sitting in your locker room, first of all, the thing that brought was law and order. Uh, because as we all know, I know Victoria knows, the locker rooms from time to time can get kind of testy. Um, some people don't want to do what, even back in the day. But when you had a Bruiser Brody sitting in your locker room, um, he required everybody's attention. You either had the ones who were just amazed by being in the room with him, and I'm talking about even the younger generation, or you had the ones that wanted to learn from him. So when he was there, they knew he was my general, basically, and he'd always sit in on the finishes with Larry and I, and uh, didn't have a problem with guys saying, "Well, no, I want to be the star tonight," or "I want to be this or that," because Frank could say, "Well, how long have you been working?" And if they say, "Oh, 6 months," he'd tell them, "Get the hell out the door," and that's what you had to do. And but we didn't have a lot of that. So, but Frank, I mean, you'd have a match with him and Abdullah, and a lot of people would say, "Well, if you saw one of those matches, you've seen them all." But it's all about timing. They knew when it was time. They knew when that crowd, that they had them right there in the palm of their hands, and they knew the payoff was coming, and uh, they do their crazy stuff. The only show I ever done on a Sunday afternoon was at high school in Dupo, Illinois, and they packed 2,200 people into the gymnasium. No seats on the floor. These people were packed into the bleachers because they had just the month before had redone the entire basketball floor, and they didn't want to put any chairs on it. So they had the whole gymnasium to just brawl all over the place. And they did. They had fans hooping and hollering and cheering. And then I took that same match up to Collinsville High School. Same thing. Only this time they went up into the bleachers and fought back down. And uh, he was a master at making the crowd believe, and that's what he was all about. He wasn't going to go out there and make himself look like a clown. Um, when you saw Frank Bruiser Brody, King Kong Brody, you saw the real deal.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the things I hear over and over is and I remember, like I said, I remember watching him in world class and whatnot, and I can just I don't think outside of Andre, but then you didn't even see much of Andre in the States. So to me, the biggest wrestler that I saw growing up, what was Bruiser Brody, because I can remember every Saturday night him walking through those crowds at the Sportatorium, and it was like he was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and if you got near him, you were either going to get wrapped with a chain or you were going to get these giant hands on you, and you were going to be in for a hurting.
Well,
But
and not only his in ring, outer ring brawling. I mean, stop and look at some of the promos that he used to cut. I mean, I think that's another side of Bruiser Brody that people forget about. When you gave him a microphone, oh my gosh! I mean, he was going to get the point over, and he did it in and especially when he came into a new territory. He knew he had to go in and establish himself, even though he was on television and all these other territories. When he got booked into a new territory, he said, "There's a new sheriff in town," and he'd get that microphone, and I'll tell you what, in the first minute or two, you knew the King Kong Bruiser Brody was in the house.
yeah, oh yeah. One of the you've had so many come through your area and St. Louis and whatnot. Tell me about. I've always been intrigued with the Gilberts, Eddie and Doug Gilbert. Can you tell me a little bit about Eddie Gilbert?
Well, you're asking the wrong person there. The Darla's the one you can get all that information from. Doug Gilbert, I've got to work with here recently down at. I'm doing a thing down in Tennessee with USA Championship Wrestling. I'm the commissioner down there, and Doug Gilbert was there, part of the 50th anniversary for Jerry Lawler. Of course, everybody that's a wrestling fan remembers the Gilberts and the Lawler feud, but Darla can tell you a lot more about the Gilbert family than I can.
Okay, Darla,
That was
talk.
nice, Sean.
tell tell us about Eddie, because we were talking a while back, and I said that I've always been intrigued about Eddie Gilbert and just loved the way the guy worked in the ring, and another one that was just golden on the mic.
So I first met Eddie and his dad and his brother in 1979 in Memphis at the WFIA convention. This was just before Eddie started wrestling. He actually was still a senior in high school, and he was photographer for the Memphis area. Him and Jim Cornette both. And so Eddie was honored that year as Rookie of the Year. He had just started, and we hit it off when we met. We became friends, and then in October of that year, Eddie left home and he went to work for Bob Geigel in the Kansas City area. So naturally, at the time, I was going to Kansas City a lot with my good friend Juanita Sapphire, and we kind of took Eddie under our wing, and we traveled down there once a month. And Sam started using Eddie in St. Louis, so he was in St. Louis fairly often. And Eddie would always he would leave the area and he'd go somewhere else for a while, and then he'd come back to Kansas City. And back then we didn't have cell phones, so we wrote letters. I still have every single item that I had of Eddie Gilbert, fan club magazines, letters. I still have all of that stuff, and I will never ever get rid of it. I don't know what'll happen to it when I die, but it ain't going nowhere. And so the last time I saw Eddie was in October of 1990, because he got married, I got married, so I kind of lost touch with the wrestling world for a while. But I saw him in October of 1990 was the last time I saw him. I still keep in touch with his family. In fact, I was just in Tennessee last year at this time and was at his mom and dad's house. Of course, we lost Tommy in 2015, so I still keep in touch with his mom and keep in touch with his sister Kim and Doug's wife, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. Eddie and I there were about 3 or 4 years, I guess, in a row. Kansas City always had a big Thanksgiving show. And so at the time, I was friends with Pat O'Connor and his wife, and I would go down Kansas City for the show, and Pat would make dinner for all of us with the turkey and everything, and Eddie would come over. Some of the guys would come over, and we'd have dinner. But I miss those days. I miss Eddie, and he was just a wonderful friend. There was one time, I don't want to mention any names, but one of the boys owed me a pretty big sum of money, and Eddie got wind of it. He was not happy. He contacted the guy's boss at the time, and I ended up getting my money. It took about 6 months, but if it hadn't been for Eddie Gilbert, I would have never seen that money. And he was just a true friend. He was the little brother I never had. And I miss him, and if I talk any more about him, I'm going to start crying.
Okay. Tell us about some of the other people. There we go again. Now mine's doing it.
About some of the other people?
Yeah.
I have a really good story. So the first wrestler that I ever met was Jack Briscoe. And of course, I've been a wrestling fan my whole entire life. My parents, my grandparents, they took me when I was a kid. Well, when I was a junior in high school, I started cosmetology. So I was sitting at my desk one day and this lady walks up and I'm reading a wrestling magazine, right? In beauty school. And this lady was older than me and she sees me reading this magazine and she said, "Are you a wrestling fan?" I said, "Oh my God, I love wrestling. It's my life." And she says, "Well, I date Jack Briscoe." And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, right. Tell me something else." Because, at the time, these guys were like movie stars to me. She said, "No, seriously." She said, "If your mom and dad will let you, the next time he's in town, I'll take you and I'll introduce you to him." Oh my God, I had to talk to my mom and dad, but they let me go. Sure enough, she introduced me to Jack. So then, I became friends with this lady and I started going to wrestling at the Chase with her and I started meeting fans and I met Larry and met Sam and Larry became probably one of my very best friends as well. And so anyway, this is where it gets kind of funny. So I always had a huge crush on Jerry, Jack's brother. But Jerry didn't wrestle in St. Louis very often. So when Jack would be in town, I'd talk to him and I'd say, "Hi Jack, how's Jerry doing?" So one day he says to me, he says, "Charlie," he says, he said, "I am the NWA champion." He said, "And every time you see me, it's, 'Hi Jack, how's Jerry?'" He said, "What about 'Hi Jack, how are you doing?'" And so that just kind of became a joke between Jack and I. And years later, I finally got to meet Jerry, and Jerry and I are good friends. He's very dear to me. And so when I told him and his son Wes that story, oh my God, they loved it. And to this day, Jerry still laughs at it. And if somebody's around that don't know it, he'll say, "Listen to
Hang on a
this
second.
story."
Hang on a second. Okay, try that, Vicky. Yeah, still not. I don't know what happened. Something happened with your connection, and
That's weird.
we can hear you every now and then, but most of the time you're dead. It's like nothing coming through. But at least we could see you, and we still got to talk to you. Wait, I just heard you laugh.
Whoa.
Oh, it's trying. Oh,
Now Darla's gone. I had
now
to go.
Darla fell off.
Ah,
Oh,
can you
there
hear
it
me
goes.
now?
Now we got you.
I unplugged the earphones.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
And now
That's
Darla's
what I
over
get for
there.
buying dollar store earphones.
Yeah. Yep.
And now I don't hear the crackling either.
What's that?
I said I don't hear the crackling like it was.
No, I think we're
Yeah,
fixed.
it's perfect now.
So I
There we
was
go.
messing up the whole show then.
No, we
No,
won't hold it against you.
we will hold you accountable.
Okay.
Vicky,
All right.
we'll talk about it later, Vicky. I'll let you know what I think.
Well,
Ah,
I'll give you 5-1 odds that you probably guess who was ringing my telephone. I'm not kidding.
Okay, I'm not going there.
I told you I was going to get you one time today.
Oh my God.
oh, this
I know.
is.
We've had a hell of a week with a friend of ours. Let's
Oh
just
yeah,
put it that way.
yeah. I needed one of Jim Duggan's 2x4s.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you can smack some sense into somebody.
So,
Um,
Darla, tell me about Sapphire. Yeah, you guys were. Everybody knows Sapphire is Dusty Rhodes' uh, manager, kind of there for a while.
right. So I met when I started going to the Chase in 1974. She was one of the first people I met. We became friends. We became best friends. I talked to her the night before she passed away. Oh my God, she never met a stranger. We traveled together. We were so after her, but actually, before I continue with this story, she started out working for Herb and she wrestled as Princess Dark Cloud. So
Yes, she did.
WWE was not her first little wrestling thing, but after just one real funny after we she worked for Vince, we took a trip to Florida. There were four of us and we were at Universal Studios, and you know how they have the characters dressed up, and there was a bunch of them hanging around and people were stopped getting autographs, and so we got our pictures and autographs and we walk away and we get a few 100 feet and I'm like, where the hell is Juanita at? We turn around and some little boy had recognized her and she's standing back there with all the characters getting pictures taken with kids and giving out autographs. So
Love.
she was never ever forgotten, and she was a wonderful human being. I miss her so terribly, but yeah,
I,
okay, Herb, you talk about her now. You guys are making me cry.
I can tell you, when she worked for me, Darla's right. She was such a princess. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And she loved the business. And I'll never forget when Larry called me and pitched the idea, because Vince's people had said that they wanted to had this uh, storyline and a gimmick they wanted to do with Dusty, and they needed a young black female to play the valet part. And I'll never forget when Larry called me and said, "Hey, this may be a wild idea, but what do you think about Juanita?" And I didn't even have to think twice. I thought, she was always bubbly, she was always outgoing, always had a smile on her face, and I mean, what better opportunity for a young lady who grew up in hard times? I mean, and Darla can attest to that. And Larry made that connection for her, and she made some good money over those few years, and she loved every bit of it, and she never forgot Larry for doing that. Every chance she got, she'd send him a note or try to call him, and if she couldn't get him, she'd call me and say, "Tell him I owe him forever." But she got a real hard lesson there because it was rough on her. It was rough being on the road. And but yeah, she was a sweetheart.
Was the road roughness because of her physical stature, or was it just
Just,
everything?
just the business in itself, and I think Victoria can tell you, at a time uh, when the locker rooms predominantly controlled by the males, and the the females lady wrestlers. I think some of the men felt like they were invading their territory, and maybe I'm off base there, but I
No,
think,
you're not. I actually have a story about
well,
uh, a,
go ahead.
a
I want to hear.
wrestler. I was dating Joe Lightfoot when I started training with Sandy. And Joe and I were sitting down one night. I told him, I said, I'm going to start training for wrestling tomorrow. He said, No, you're not. I'm not going to date any Mickey Mouse wrestler. And I said, and he said, You're going to quit. I said, No, I'm not. He said, Then we're done. 2 o'clock in the morning, I grabbed my gear and left his house. And I saw him about 82, 83. And he was still that way. He did not think women belonged in the wrestling ring.
Well, and I think that's why, especially with Juanita, because she, Dusty Rhodes of all people, all of a sudden, here you're this female hanging around at the matches in St. Louis and in Kansas City, and then in a blink of an eye, almost it seemed like for her, you're on the main stage, and not
Right.
only are you on the main stage, you're out there with the American Dream.
Right.
I mean, she used to be in houses that I would have with a couple hundred, 300, 400, 500 people. Now all of a sudden you're in Madison Square Garden. The pressure is just astronomical, but she, I am so glad that she was the one that Larry had made that connection for, because that was a success story for her. She left us way too early, but I can say she always appreciated the opportunity. And then, what I really found, what was it, a year ago? We were out in Vegas and we ran into her son, Rico. I remember you come and got me and said, "You'll never guess who we ran into here." And him and I are friends on social media now, and we stay in touch. And
my gosh, Rico's friends with everybody now.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I mean. And I can see where he got his mannerism. I mean,
oh my gosh, yes.
But yes, I mean, he is Juanita all over. In fact, I remember when you brought me back down there to the lobby at our little table that you all have there. What's it called? The St. Louis table or whatever. But
yeah, right. No, I think it was
The
Sean.
TGI St. Louis table.
It's Barbara, Herb, and Darla's table.
Yeah. And that seems to be where everybody comes, and it's like I say, it's the shit magnet table.
I don't like that.
There's a lot of crap that gets sold on that table. But and then it seems like the later the night goes on, the more it piles up.
The more it stretches.
But when I walked back down there and they said, "You know who this is?" and I'm looking at this young man, and I didn't at first, but then when he told me, I could see, I can see it in the face, and she'd be proud of Rico, and I know he was proud of his mom.
Yes, she would. The best part.
Are we talking about Rico Suave?
No, his name is
Morgan.
Yeah, Rico Morgan.
Yes.
He's on Facebook, Sean. Look him up.
Nice young man.
Because we had a guy on a while back that was, I believe, his name was Rico something, and he's was he in the Puerto Rico maybe?
No, different guy.
Okay,
different guy. But the best part of that day was I went upstairs because, Juanita was really super, super close to Jack and Jerry Briscoe. And I went upstairs and I found Jerry and I said, "Jerry, you need to come to Fridays. I got somebody that you've got to meet." Yep. And Jerry walked in there and one look at Rico and he knew. And they talked for several minutes and he told Rico, he said, my brother and I, he said, not only my brother-in-law or my brother and I, but everyone, he said, we just loved your mom so much. And Jerry actually had tears in his eyes and he hugged Rico and kissed him on the forehead. And he said, "I am so glad I got to meet you." He said, "because I just adored your mother." Everybody did. Mm-hmm. Everybody just loved her.
Darla, I interviewed Jerry a couple of weeks ago on our Sunday night show. Did you get to listen to that?
I did.
Okay, we talked about you and Barbara, and then I think it was in the week before that I had interviewed Terry Funk, and of course I made my mistake when I had Jerry on and I started running down. I said, and I've been bringing all these legends on, the guys who built the foundation that we're building on, and last week I had Terry Funk on, and I'm so glad this week that I got Jerry Briscoe on. Of course, that was the wrong thing to do because he said, "What in the hell are you doing, bringing me on second after that dang Terry Funk?" And you know, he just played right into the interview, you know. So
Oh, that is
I love me some Jerry Briscoe and Terry Funk, and like I said,
me
it's
too. And you know what? There were never, I don't care what anybody says, there were never any matches in St. Louis like the Funks and the Briscoes against each other.
I remember
Oh,
the first year you got me and Jerry got me to go out there to Vegas, and they gave Jerry the microphone. If you remember, we were sitting there, and of course he was going around interviewing people, and he come up to me and and I said, "Well, what brought you here?" I said, "Well, you invited me here, and they told me Terry Funk was here. I thought we just reunite the Funk Briscoe feud, and the place was epic, you know." I mean, no matter where you go, the Funks and the Briscoes was the thing, you know.
yeah. I mean, it was just awesome.
Yeah,
I don't care what anybody says, they can't be beat.
well, and I'm partial to St. Louis, as you all know. That to
Of
me,
course we are.
that was the hub of wrestling, and you know, anybody that I've been with. Frank used to say it. Ric Flair has said it in his book. Everybody that I have worked with all these years said you made it big when you made it to St. Louis. There was no place like Chase Park Plaza, you know.
Wrestling at the Chase.
Oh yeah, white tablecloths and Darla, I haven't really told anybody, but I can go ahead because I'm sure it's going to happen real soon. But I'm negotiating with KPLR Channel 11 to put the show back on. We're trying to reach an agreement on the time slot. I'm asking for the same time slot that wrestling at the Chase used to be on, and so we will put the old classic St. Louis wrestling back on there
Whoa.
along with some of the current stuff that we're doing. And as I told you, you know, I just acquired the Dick the Bruiser's library, so
Yeah.
we've got all of that footage also. So
I can't wait till you get to bring Spike in because I'm coming home.
yeah, Spike was supposed to be in with Barbara and me this last Bruiser Brody Memorial, and I keep telling everybody that it wasn't canceled; it was postponed because you know my promise has been since 1988 when that tragic time happened that as long as I got breath in me, Bruiser Brody will live on forever. And you know, when I got fans that come here like the Jerry Bullion that wears his Bruiser Brody shirt at every match. His family has been coming to 40 years of matches for SICW, and Barbara can tell you when she comes in, that chant of Brody, 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 it just sends goosebumps all over you.
But Herb, you have to tell them too that every time I come in, you put me in the show with some angle of some description.
Well, Barbara, does he pay you?
People, I've thrown garbage bins in the ring and chairs.
It would
And
not
she
be
does good.
it would not be a night with Barbara. I mean, how do you have a Bruiser Brody memorial and
And not have her involved.
and not have her? I mean, the first night we had her use a chair, and then we had her. The next year we had her use a trash can. The next year she got to slap Travis Cook, I think, or somebody or whoever it was. And then I had Dr. D. David Schultz as her bodyguard to 1 year.
Yeah, what about when I had to take Curtis's, is it Curtis? Yeah, hair.
Yeah.
Pull his hair over the top rope. Now I couldn't do that. He's got short hair.
Yeah, but it's fun, and the fans love Barbara, and I mean, that's probably, you know, we had 32 shows booked for this year. Of course, the COVID has got us, and I hate it because, you know, most of our shows are for nonprofit organizations, so that means that the fire departments and those type of organizations are doing without those much needed funds. But the show that everybody talks about is that Bruiser Brody memorial and that beautiful trophy cup that Larry and I had made. And but we're going to do it. Hopefully, we get this dang COVID out of here, and we get back. My first match that we're going to do back is a fan free night. The wife and I said that we owe it to our fans who's been free of wrestling, to just let them come back and let their hair down, and we'll have a fan-free night farm and just have a good old time.
That's a good way to do it. That's a good way to bring it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Absolutely.
go ahead, Donna.
you mentioned Dr. D. David Schultz. I'll never forget when you told me, you called me and said you were bringing him in, and I said, "Oh my God, Herb, are you crazy? Nobody wants to see that guy. I've never heard anything good about him." But you know what? I am so glad. I'm so glad you didn't listen to me, because he turned out to be the nicest guy. We're friends now, and I just love him dearly. I've talked to him a couple times on the phone, and so that's one time I'm glad you didn't listen to me.
Well, I'd known Dee for many years because I knew him back when he was doing the bounty hunting, and
Mhm.
he used to come in where I was a police officer at in Washington Park, Illinois. And
Yeah.
of course, in Illinois, bounty hunting is against the law. But he would come in and he'd be looking for some fugitives in Chicago. And my friend and I, that was Illinois State Trooper, had connections in the Chicago area, so we would help locate his fugitives for him, and he'd sneak in town in the state in the dark at night and find them, and then get back out of town. And he'd tell them, he said, "Now look, you can either go with me or you can go to Cook County Jail." And they'd say, "We're going with you." Nobody wants to go to Cook County Jail. So, but no, D is, in fact, him and I talk all the time, and he loves Barbara. That every time we talk, he asks about you girls, and him and Peggy.
Yeah.
Oh, and Peggy's wonderful too.
She's a sweetheart, I tell you. He talks about how she walks around the compound there with her 357 on her side. So, yeah, he's great. But yeah, and he's another one that, like I said, over the years, he had great stories to tell about Frank, and everybody respected him, and Dr. D was one of them. But,
Vicky, your mic's going goofy again, ain't it?
No,
Nope.
it's not
Yeah.
my mic. Can you
Is it
hear
you,
me?
Barbara? Yeah, you're fine. I can hear you.
Okay, I don't have the earphones in. I'm just using the
Oh
regular
yeah,
mic.
it's not.
I
That's
hear the
right.
static. I hear the static too.
I do too. Now it's
Me
gone.
too.
Not,
Okay.
But
There he is
Herb,
again.
Dr. D was one of my biggest supporters for my back surgery. He called me on the phone and talked to me for, oh my gosh, 45 minutes to an hour about it, and gave me some good advice, told me the do's and don'ts. And, I really appreciated that coming from somebody like him. You don't know what that means, but he's a good guy.
great guy, I'll tell you. And he's another one that you were out in Vegas when they honored him out there, and that was a tense evening. Of course, Barbara, you know what
yeah.
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had
I
told
knew it
me
was
the
going to
day.
be like that. It's Dr. D.
Yeah, he told me
He's
the
straight
day.
from the hip.
He told me the day before. He says, they're making a mistake tomorrow night." And
Oh,
I said, "What's
yeah.
that, D?" And he said, "They're giving me the microphone."
Yeah,
And,
it's a bad idea.
and boy, he did, and he didn't pull back. I mean, and he told me everything he was going to say, and he said it. And he reminds me that when I talk to him now, he'll say, "I told you I was going to do what I did." And again, he is one that got screwed royal by Vince McMahon, and I don't blame him a bit for feeling the way he does.
Yeah.
Nope.
And
It is amazing how many people that Vince McMahon Jr., I call him Vinny, I can't even say Mr. McMahon where his name is concerned, has screwed over.
Well,
And
there's one
yet
thing.
people still keep going to him.
Well, there's one thing I can tell you. There's two guys I know he didn't get to screw over one time, and that was me and Larry Matisek.
Right?
He sent in our good friend J.R. Ross and Ted DiBiase, another dear friend.
Yes.
And Vince wanted to buy that footage of wrestling at the Chase from us. And
Right.
they sent JR and Ted in, and they were the negotiators. And he wanted that footage bad because that's when he was buying up all the footage everywhere. He had just bought up the Von Erich stuff and a few of the other territories. And to this day, Vince McMahon does not have the footage that I've got of wrestling at the Chase.
Thank you, sir.
Because
Yeah.
as I told Larry, I said, yeah, you can sell it to him. And I tell you, he offered him $25,000 for it. And we know what he had offered. We know what he paid Kevin Von Erich for their footage because Larry and Kevin and I was talking back then. And I got to give credit to Jim Ross and to Ted DiBiase. They said, don't shoot the messengers.
Right.
And as they were making their pitch for it, they're sitting there going like this. Because they knew what it was worth.
He wants to offer you this, but
I kept Larry, thanks to him, and of course now, and again, that a lot of that material has been bootlegged because we put it on 12 different volumes, and I've got volume 13 done. Larry and I was working on that before he passed away. The same way with his last book. He was one chapter away from getting that done, and I've got that his wife and I keep saying we're going to finish because he told me what the last chapter the book is about the difference between Sam Muchnick and Vince McMahon. And when he first pitched the idea to me, I told him, I said, it's a great concept, but it's going to be probably, if you thought the book of what you and Barbara did with Frank, because the personal relationship, of course, that Barbara had with Frank, and then the friendship that Larry and Frank had, it had to be tough on both of them. Wouldn't you agree, Barbara?
Definitely.
So what I told him about this last one that he was trying to finish is that he loved Sam Muchnick because a lot of people didn't know that was the only job Larry ever had. Yeah, other than a few ones that he lasted for about a week or two, and then he quit because he couldn't get off on a Friday night to go to the wrestling.
That's right.
So he would quit. So when he went to work for Sam when he was 16 years old, got his first paycheck from him, Sam told him, finish school and you've got a job, and that's what he did. And that's where he worked, except for then he went to work for Vince, and he worked for Vince for 10 years. And I was the one who was telling him then, he's paying you. He'd sooner have you on the inside peeing than outside peeing in. Mm-hmm. So take his money and be happy with it. And he did that for 10 years. And I don't say brag about it. I'm the one that got him fired from Vince McMahon, but he knew it was coming anyway. And that story is him and I and Frank was booking these independent shows behind the scenes. And I mean, we were running strong, and we got to a point where we were doing a show with the WWE. I was doing the front shows for them on their spot shows back then. And they wanted to do, my wife was on the school board at this Dupo High School, and they wanted to do one there. And Larry told me, he said, now look, he said, they're going to start calling you about 6 weeks out, wanting to know what the advanced sales are. And if they aren't good, when it gets down to be 7 days out, they'll pull the plug on it. And I said, can't have my wife. She's on the school board. I'm the mayor of my hometown, which is a community right next door. That'll look bad on us. So Larry showed me how to each Monday when they called for the advanced sales, how to add a little bit more on the ticket sales on the advance. So it got down to be that, week before the show. And I said, oh yeah, we got $21,000 in advanced ticket sales.
You worked, Vince. I love it.
And I've never told, I think I may have told Tony, because Tony was one of the agents at that time. Him and Renee Goulet was the road agent. And so
wow,
they showed up, and the show, we only ended up with about a $9,000 house. And a week later, it's when Larry got his pink slip. But he knew it was coming anyway. But
wow,
somebody screwed Vince over.
Well, that's because
I will carry that story to my grave. Herb, that was awesome.
You and Larry were probably in reality, the lone survivors of the territories. You
Yep.
guys were the only ones that to this day did not sell out and refused to sell out to the corporate billionaire.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and that was twice. Like I said, when they offered the money for the tapes, and I told, and Larry wasn't going to take it anyway, but I'm sitting there kicking him under the table. Hey, I'm telling you, we can, and I did. I sold those wrestling at the Chase volumes. We shipped them all around the globe. It was because
Yep.
what people didn't realize for 10 years, and when I say 10 years, I don't mean 9 years. I don't mean 8 years. 10 years, I worked on Larry Matisek to sell those tapes to put them together. I would call him sometimes every day or a couple times a week and say, "Hey, Larry, you got that footage?" And he'd always say, Herb, nobody's interested in that crap. He said, it's all over with. The people who grew up on it or got their minds elsewhere. And I say, no, you're wrong. And he'd say, oh, you're just a fan. I said, but there's a lot of me out there, I can tell you.
Yep.
And we were always late night, as Barbara can tell you. Larry and Frank did their best work at late night on the telephone, and then he'd get off the phone because we didn't have the way to do the three-way calls and all that. But he'd get off the phone with Frank and then call me and say, "Hey, Frank says we ought to look at this, we ought to look at that," and so I told Larry, I said, we can take these tapes and we can, and they were on the 3/4 inch reels from the TV, and and he say, oh, and he called me one morning and said it was actually because he was always a late nighter, wouldn't get up until noon, and one morning about 9 o'clock my phone rings and it's him, and he says, hey, big boy, he says, you're right, let's do some of those tapes. So we find a production guy that he knew, we look at him, and everything is crystal clear on them. And we reproduced, when we first came out with them, they was on VHS. We were selling those first volumes, 1, 2, and 3, for $34.95 a volume.
Nice.
And so I'll never forget. We had a guy named Scott. Can't think of Scott's last name, but he produced those first 3 VHS tapes for us. He got a divorce. We thought, oh, hell, now what are we going to do? We only got 3 volumes. We got a lot more footage. So Larry finds Charlie Regal, the guy who you may have heard us talk about him, Darla, used to teach Kelly's volleyball coach.
Yep.
So we go to Charlie, and he says, how old is some of this footage? And we say, well, the oldest we got is 1962. He says, oh, my God, it's going to be sawdust. So he opens up the container, puts it in his machine, and it's crystal clear as can be.
Nice.
So the more he starts looking at this footage, and we showed him the 3 VHS tapes we got there, he turns around and he says, hey, have you guys ever thought about putting these on DVDs? And I'll never forget, Larry and I looked at one another and said, what the hell is a DVD? We didn't know. And so he pulled some blanks out of the file, and he said, these things here. I said, I couldn't tell you what they look like a Frisbee to me, So we started producing, and we went back and did volumes 1, 2, and 3 on DVDs, and then finished out the rest of the dozen on DVDs. And like I said, that one, and this wasn't timed this way, but we had a good friend, and Darla, I know you know Frank Cusimano, the sports director at the local news channel. After we got the first 3 volumes on DVDs and VHS there, I looked at Larry and I said, Larry, do you know what we've just done? He said, what? I said, this is November that year. I said, do you know what comes in December?
Yeah.
And he said, what? I said,
Christmas.
holidays. And literally for that whole month up to Christmas, we had an assembly line in my living room of the old-fashioned ironing boards, you ironed your clothes on.
Yep.
My wife had them set end to end, and my kids were helping fill packages, and we were making our own labels for them. I was out on Christmas Eve that year meeting people at the McDonald parking lot. We were like doing a dope deal. I was handing packages out. They were handing me money. So we sold a lot of them, and like I said, we still get calls on them to this day. People want them. because the nostalgia of wrestling in St. Louis. You know, where else can you see Bruiser Brody against Dory Funk Jr. or Dick
Yep.
Murdoch or Ric Flair against Dick the Bruiser? Pat O'Connor, Gene Kaniski. They all come to St. Louis. They were all superstars.
And you know
Wow.
what? Most of those guys, if you ask them where their favorite territory area was to wrestle, they will tell you for Sam Mushnick in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, and they appreciated Sam because they'd say if their payoff at a show was $1,285.83, when you opened your envelope up, the 83 cents was in there also.
Right.
That's the reputation Sam had. And I remember Sam always telling me that. The night that he told me we were at the Fairmount Park racetrack. He used to love to go to the ponies, and there was a restaurant there that had great steaks, and Sam loved to eat his steaks. And the first time Larry took me there, I'll never forget. Sam sitting there had them glasses on, and he was cutting that steak up, and he says, my man here, Larry, says, you want to know a little bit more about the business. And I said, well, yeah, I'd like to. And he took that knife, that steak knife, and he held it up. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. I've always heard the wrestling business is rough, but am I getting ready to get my throat cut or what the heck here? And he takes that knife and he points it to his ear and he said, you keep these open. And he put it to his lips and said, keep these closed and you'll learn a lot about this business.
Yep.
And so 48 years in February, I've tried to do that. And it's been fun. Haven't made no money at it, but it's been fun.
You know, it's
Yeah.
funny that saying that you just said, Herb, Sandy Barr told me that. He said, anytime there's an old timer in the room, you keep your mouth shut and your ears open. And that was probably one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got in wrestling.
Well, and now this younger generation out there, they know it all. And you know why they know it all or why they think they know it all?
Because they haven't been trained properly.
Well,
Because they ain't listening to nobody else.
there's
Right.
17 hours of high flying on television a week. And they think that they watch a Monday Night Raw or a Sunday night, whatever it is. I don't even watch it. I haven't watched a Monday Night Raw or whatever night they're on.
It's Friday night now. I accidentally turned my TV on to it last Friday. And I went, no.
The only time I will watch it is when Bob Orton runs my training academy for me. If his son Randy is in a storyline, Bob will tell me, he'll say, hey, Randy, they're working this angle with him. And I'll tune in because, we gave Randy his first match at South Broadway Athletic Club. And,
Right.
And so I keep up with it. And that was 22 years ago.
Right.
That happened. But otherwise, I can't watch it.
Have any of you looked at ROH, Ring of Honor?
I
Not
was
lately.
I was at the first taping in Chicago years ago. Jim Cornette. That's when he was running the show, and Jim invited me up there. And I'll tell you, that was probably one of the worst experiences I ever. And I told Jim, to this day, I tell him, every match had 3 or 4 managers at ringside.
You need to give them a second chance.
Really?
Yes. Especially with the women's matches. Kelly Klein has been there. Suki. What's her first name, Darla?
I have no
The
idea.
Japanese. They are doing old school wrestling now.
Well, then that's all I need to hear.
And I happened on them one night, and they happened to have a women's match on, and I went, oh my God, they're not cookie cutters. They have clothes on.
Yeah.
But the men's matches, yes, they have lucha libre. They have the Japanese wrestlers, but they have old school wrestling too.
Well,
They've got like a combination of everything, but this other, comedy, they don't do the comedy.
AEW's not too bad neither for most times.
I've seen AEW, I think, once, but I can't remember what night they're on, so I don't catch them. But ROH I have watched.
Cody just did a dog collar match with Greg Valentine in the audience.
Really?
Yeah, last week it was Cody and Brody Lee is his independent name, which he went back to. And they did an angle. Cody went out for a couple of weeks. Brody won the title. Cody comes back a couple of weeks later, or about 6 weeks later, and wins the title back in a dog collar match.
Right.
And I thought they did pretty well. Even some of the looks on Greg's face in the audience, he seemed to be pretty happy with the way they did it, especially for TV.
The scary part about that is if they did that in a turnaround time of a couple of weeks, somebody needs to learn a little bit more booking.
Well, something that I noticed on ROH is when they get into the old school matches and they have the technical matches, they have good guy, they got babyface versus babyface, and it's technical wrestling. They have the other matches too, but you will hear the crowd when they go totally old school in a match. You will hear the crowd going, "This is wrestling." And they will chant that over and over again. And you with the DVDs that you're putting out, people want from the contact I have with people today, and I'm really surprised. 90% of the fans I talk to, they want the old school wrestling back. They want to believe. They want to be brought into the story. They want to hate the bad guy. They want to love the babyface. They're sick of this over-the-top, bumpity, bump, gotta get my 5,000 things in. Oh, and let's do 15 finishes before we have an actual finish. They're over it. And
let's kick out at a half a one.
Right.
Let's not even get a one, and we're gonna kick out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's have no suspense whatsoever. And oh my God, psychology. What the hell happened to psychology?
Well, or the basic, yeah. And that's why I told you earlier. I'm helping a friend of mine, Bert Prentice, down in Tennessee. We're doing a commissioner role down there with him. And Bert's been in it 40 plus years also. And he's got his TV going, and it's USA Championship Wrestling. And I'll tell you what, when I walked into the TV studio down there 3 months ago now, it took me back to the days of the Chase.
Right.
And I mean, he is doing it old school because that's what he is. And I mean, he is putting a product out. If you go on YouTube and search USA Championship Wrestling, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's the production is it's an independent show, but I'll tell you what, I'm proud to say I'm affiliated with him because it is the closest thing that I have seen. The interviews are done at ringside.
Right.
Not all the glimmer and clamor, and I mean they get in there, and I've taken a few of my guys down there, Ricky Cruz and Attila Khan and Travis Cook and people like that, and they're telling storylines, and that's what people follow. And,
well, this is what people want. I'm telling you, they're sick of as the stomach turns.
Right.
They're sick of talk, then bumpity, bump. I'm serious.
And Darla, you've been at enough of our shows, and I try to stand at the door at nighttime after it's over with and thank the fans for coming. And you've got them hooked when they're telling you, "Boy, you pulled a rabbit out of the hat tonight." Just when we thought we might have it figured out, you've changed something up on us.
You pulled a Piper.
When you can sit there and say, A is going to win tonight, you haven't got
Right.
them fooled.
No.
And I'm one that I like to listen to my fans because that's who's buying the tickets. And you know, it takes me after a Saturday night show, my entire Sunday up until about 6, 7 o'clock Sunday evening is tied up with answering text messages from fans, you know, reliving the night before, telling me, "Oh, is so and so okay? You know, is he all right?" And to me, that's when the believing is there. Now,
Right.
The
those are
believability, yeah.
that's what you want. And that's why when I get interviewed by the local people when I go in to do a show, you know, you got this news reporter, somebody like a John Strassel or whatever his name is, a Dr. D knocked the hell out of. When they ask me that question, I tell them, I said, now wait a minute, I'm not the smartest stack in the sharpest stack in the shed, but let me ask you a question. John Wayne's my hero. I watch John Wayne over and over. My wife complains that I know every word of almost every John Wayne movie out there. And if I want to believe John Wayne shot the bad guy or he shot the Indians, you and nobody else is going to tell me any different.
That's right.
So if you want to think you're going to tell me that wrestling is fake, get up in that ring with a Dr. D or a Bruiser Brody and just do one favor before you do that. Tell them that it's fake before you go in there.
Oh no,
Yeah.
do it with me.
Yeah, Victor.
I'm stand up because Sandy Bar. There was one thing Sandy Bar told me before my first match, and I'll never forget it. He said, "I'm going to tell you right now that there's going to be a day that a fan is going to come out of that crowd and get in the ring, and I don't care if that fan is 7'5", weighs 450 pounds. If you can't take him out, you have no place in a wrestling ring."
No. Well, the 3, 4 weeks ago, I got a real newfound respect for the men and women that do professional wrestling because down at the USA, we were doing the TV taping and we were doing an angle where I was doing a promo for my fans back here in St. Louis saying that SICW is coming back. You know, the COVID's had to shut down. I appreciate your patience. And then earlier, the episode before, the week before, I had suspended Attila Khan and Travis Cook because they were running roughshod down there. And they come bombard me from behind the cameras and they throw me into the ring apron. And I thought I'd cracked a couple of ribs and they just ended up being bruised. But I'm going to tell you what, for about 2 weeks, I couldn't hardly breathe. So I don't know bullshit about it being fake because, like I said, I had to go to the doctor, I had to get x-rays. And I finally went back to the doctor and I said, man, doc, I said, I think my ribs are broke. He said, well, the x-rays say they're not. He said, but I'm not worried about your broken ribs. I said, wait a minute. What do you mean you're not worried about my ribs? He said, if I can't do nothing for your ribs, but if you're not breathing right, then I got a big problem. You're going to get pneumonia. You're going to end up in the hospital. So we got to get your pain under control. But
Right.
So I have a newfound respect for what you men and women do in that squared circle or outside that squared circle. And I don't take bumps. I don't like that.
Right.
Flash Flanagan tries to get me to take bumps and all that stuff, but I said, no, I'm not taking no bumps. So
It's not an easy thing to do once in a while. If you take a bump, you better have taken about 150 bumps before you take the first one.
nope. And if I'm going to get in there, I want Barbara Gooding to be my tag partner.
Definitely.
That's not fair. That's cheating.
A couple of years ago, I was like, I wanted to do something different, and so I went in and I started going to training classes that they had in Portland and I was like, I just want to be a referee. That's all I want. I just want to be a referee, you know, and I was better than half the students in there. At least I could do the rolls and things, and you know, at least I can do the back bumps and stuff. But I tell you what, after about 2 weeks, 3 weeks of that, I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. My body's already broken. It's going to be even more broken.
Darla, that's a good question. with your knowledge of the business, why didn't you ever want to get into it?
Really?
I don't know. I just never. I always enjoyed being a fan and sitting in the front row. Barbara, I sat in the front row always. Sorry.
Okay, rub it in, rub it in.
But I think probably because I'm not a fighter and I don't like getting hurt. So,
Yeah.
but I like watching it.
That's all right. We love you anyway, Darla. You know that.
Well, I love you guys too. And Sean, he wanted to do something different. He did something different. All right. I don't know if y'all remember this, but he did the strut last year
Oh,
at CAC.
Oh,
my
that's
gosh.
right.
Oh Lord, did you really? Do you
Yes,
remember the
sir.
strut that when I was there?
Yep.
oh,
They're doing the strut, right? I'm feeling fine, sitting in a bar stool. And this guy, who was it that came over to me? What was his name, Darla? You were there.
I don't remember. Gosh, I don't remember what I did yesterday.
Was you drunk?
Who, Darla?
Probably.
Never. Her and I don't imbibe. We are teetotalers.
Not at
Anyway,
CAC.
they do the strut at CAC in the back
Yep.
left hand corner bar.
Herb's been there.
Right. All right. I'm sitting there on my bar stool minding my own business.
Mm-hmm.
One of really? And all of a sudden, I am lifted by both cheeks off my seat by a guy. Now, I have physical issues, right?
Okay.
I have serious physical issues. Before I knew it, he's doing a spin with me around his waist, and I'm looking up and I'm telling him, you better not drop me.
Oh,
And I couldn't believe it. They didn't win the strut.
oh.
You remember that.
Yep. I
That
don't
was
remember who it was though.
I know. Me either. I can't remember his name. That was the night that Raven had to babysit me.
Uh-oh. Next year I'm doing the strut.
just remember
Really?
what happens.
Yeah,
in
that
Vegas
was-
stays in Vegas.
Yeah, that was
Days
the
later.
first year that I had missed, and Raven and a whole bunch of people were there.
Oh, it was me, Raven, Beverly Shade, Judy Martin. Judy comes in, and Judy and I loved being on the road with Judy. I mean, it wasn't work. It was a vacation. And Judy comes in. I'm sitting at our table there at TGIF, and she stops and she talks to Beverly. Beverly's at one of the tables on a bar stool, and I looked up and I said, "Hey, yo!" You could see Judy flinch when I said it because I said it loud. And she went back talking to Beverly, and I said it again, and I said it loud. Hey, yo, witch! She flinches again. The third time I said it, she turned and looked at me. Now, you got to understand, we hadn't seen each other in 32 years.
Wow.
But when she looked at me before she realized who I was ready to run. But anyway, me, Beverly Shade, Judy Martin, Darla was in and out. We all out, and Debbie Combs.
Oh, Debbie. Yeah.
Oh, God love her. But Beverly was the oldest in the crew. She was up after the rest of us went to bed.
Oh, she's always a
love
late
her.
nighter.
Oh, I love her.
Me too.
There's been two people I have met in my life that have made me want to be 20 years older. And that was Cora Combs when I met her at Scott Teal's reunion. She was a pistol.
Uh,
I so wanted to be 20 years older so I could have been on the road with her.
her and Deb did a lot of work for us back in the day, and I got the best of both worlds because we'd have Deb against Cora under a hood.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, and it worked. And you
I remember that.
remember Chuck Riley?
Yep.
Chuck used to be one of the referees, and he
And he
always
always loved reffing the women's matches.
he always had to referee the women's matches. He loved Cora, and but yeah, Cora, we'd put her under a hood, and her and Debbie would work all over the territory for us.
Oh my God. That I would have loved to have been part of that because I love Debbie to death.
Yeah,
And Cora, that broke my heart.
did Deb just get injured or something? Did you see that?
Yes, she's a bounty hunter.
Yeah, I know that.
And she went to get a guy, and her and her partner, who was also a female, went into the house. The guy was hiding in the closet, and he literally, and I saw the pictures, he literally kicked the back door out of the trailer, frame and all.
Yeah, I saw that.
But he busted Debbie's lip right here. It took 10 stitches inside and I think 7 or 8 stitches outside. And she just got the outside stitches out. Oh,
wow.
If you ever wanted somebody to shoot on somebody, Debbie's your bet.
Well, I'm telling you, back in the day because we worked them quite a bit, and she was good. Like I said, her and Candy Divine and Cora and Donna.
Yep.
But we had a regular. When we were running the circuit, they were with us quite a bit.
Like I said, I would have loved to have been part of that crew.
I think we inducted her 2 years ago. We had her. It was a year or two ago. We inducted her into the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. She came up, and Malaya was with her, and I mean, what a great lady she is too. You know.
Well, she's the one who got me, Judy, Joyce.
Yep. Joyce there. Yeah.
Beverly, all the
several
old
of you
girls.
there.
And from what I found out, she came out of pocket.
Yes, she did.
Several $1,000
to help us get there.
Several $1,000 out of her own pocket to make that women's old timer reunion together.
The surprise was it wasn't the induction for me into the Hall of Fame. It was the plaque that I got from Malaya.
Yes.
In fact, that plaque is right here, and it's mentors, trainers, teachers, and trailblazers. Yes, I appreciate CAC, but that plaque from Malaya, that's going to be buried with me.
Well, and because I'm telling you, she is sincere about everything that she says, and I mean, I don't know if you follow her on social media.
Oh yes, sir. We're good friends.
I'm going to tell you, when she's fired up, I always comment on there. I know somebody's pissed her off when she gets on a rampage.
I've seen you comment. Who pissed you off now, Malaya?
I would not want to be on the other end of that. So
right. Yeah, I steal a lot of her posts and repost them.
Yeah, her and Tokyo Monster are good friends, and I've had them in a couple times together. And there's a guy, Paul, is just why Vince had never picked him up. I have no idea.
I don't get it.
Because Vince doesn't have a freaking clue.
Well,
see, this is the thing that gets me. Is I remember when Vince was a little pencil neck geek running around behind Hogan and Piper and, just falling all over them. And then he's done what he's done to wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
The guys that he used to worship, he has just totally degraded.
Yep.
And I don't get it. Does he want to destroy wrestling?
Well, you know what he said back in the early days is that he was going to do one of two things. He was either going to have it all, or he was going to turn it into a carnival.
Well,
And
he does not have it all, obviously, because he has obviously turned it into a carnival.
exactly, and I mean, look at what he's done. Even when he's brought what I call the legends, how he's degraded them. Harley Race, you know,
Yeah,
he's always put them guys into a position of trying to shame them. You know, these are guys that I mean,
look what
ladies
he did to Adrian Adonis.
exactly. You know,
Adrian Adonis was the gimmick that Adrian had was so over.
yep,
Him and Ron Starr were here in the Pacific Northwest, and they were tagging. And they were tagging against Buddy and Piper. And every seat at the Chautauqua Sports Arena, in Yakima, wherever you went, because me being a mark, of course, on my 7-day vacation, I got on a bus trip and followed wrestling for 7 days.
there you go.
But wherever you went, when Adie and Ron and Paul and Pipe were there, it was sold out.
Oh, wow.
You know, and what he did to Adrian,
Yeah. Well, you know, there was one other guy that he couldn't get his claws into like he wanted to, and that was Bruiser Brody.
right.
And you know, for years that was everybody wanted that dream match. They wanted Brody against.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, there was talk about it, and Barbara can tell you she probably had some heard conversations when Frank would be talking about it. But I know Larry and myself and Frank, if that match would ever have taken place, it would have been box office without a doubt. But,
Absolutely.
there was no trust value there.
Right.
I mean, he actually. I think I may have lost somebody here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I
Okay.
can hear you.
You're still good.
Okay, good. Yeah, Frank didn't trust Vince, of course, and of course Hogan was scared of Frank.
Well, Hogan. See, I knew Terry when Terry started out as Terry Hogan in the Pacific Northwest. And my first trip to New York.
You remember who his partner was?
Huh?
You remember who his partner was? When they would tag him? Yeah, when they would tag him occasionally. Because he's only in and out a few different times.
Was it Beefcake?
Yes. As Dizzy Hogan. His cousin, Dizzy Hogan.
Oh God, that's why I love these podcasts, because it gets my brain set. I remember that. I've got a story I'll tell you all in private about that one day.
Brutus, to this day, swears that gimmick was, and I'm like, he blocked me from his Twitter account.
Oh,
because I mentioned that, and I said, "Bro, I could pull that match up on YouTube right now."
right. Well,
What year was that?
oh shoot, I was probably before I started training, and it was before St. Helens blow. No, it wasn't late 80s. It was late
early
70s.
Yeah, 79, 80, maybe 81.
Okay,
No, it wasn't 80 or 81 because St. Helens hadn't blown yet, and I wasn't training yet.
Well, in
then it would have been 78 or 79 then.
Summer of 79.
Yeah.
So in summer of 79, they were in Memphis for a while, and they were going as, I think, the Boulder Brothers.
Yep.
They just couldn't figure out who they wanted to be.
Well, anyway, like I said, I knew Terry personally. You know, I was running with Pipe and the gang, Rick Oliver and all them. And so I knew Terry. I mean, we partied together. We'd had a few beers together. Exit stage left to 1981. I'm at Madison Square Garden, my first time. My anxiety level is at, it's not at 10, it's at 25. And here comes Terry. And I went, "Hey, Terry, how you doing? I'm just looking for a place to land, get some comfort, chill. Because I can't go into the ring going 900 miles an hour." Terry walks by me like he didn't know who the hell I was.
Girl,
Oh,
that's
wait
him.
for it. Wait for it. And I'm sitting there for about a second. And you know how I am, Darla.
Mm-hmm.
Pipe's sitting over on a bench over there. Terry gets about 20 feet from me. And I've never been accused of being quiet. Backstage, Madison Square Garden, at the top of my voice, low bass, I go, "Prima donna much, Hogan?" Piper was curled up on the bench laughing.
Oh, I bet. Barbara, I was telling them about the dream match that everybody had wanted, Frank against Hogan.
And because he knew that, so that's why he was keeping that for his last thing when the Japan trip was, starting to wind down. He was getting older, wasn't physically able. It was just when the Road Warriors were going over there, because that was going to be the next ones that they were going to push. So he knew that he was older, that he had to keep that one match. He didn't want to go back to Vince to do that match, because that match would have sold out. Everybody, you're right, everybody wanted to see it.
And I would have loved to seen him stretch Hogan.
And that's what I was telling him while you stepped away, that there was talk with Frank and Larry, and I was a part of a couple of those conversations. And it was a trust factor there. Vince didn't trust Frank. Frank didn't trust Vince. And Hogan was scared of Frank, and just knew that push comes to shove on live TV. I can tell you what Frank would have done.
I would give everything I own, have owned, will own
And I
to
can
see that.
I can tell you there was a plan in place, and our good friend Jerry Blackwell was a part of that. Frank had solicited his help in case there was going to be a double cross.
Lord.
So, yeah,
And it would have happened eventually, as I said. Just that circumstances came in, and and everybody was left wondering. Beauty against the Beast.
Oh,
What a match that would have been.
The marketing on that would have been priceless.
Oh.
Well, I heard that match was so close to coming that when Frank got back from Puerto Rico, that they were talking about putting that match. That match was coming, possibly.
Wow.
I can tell you, this is in '88, of course. The weekend before, Frank was with Larry and I in Cahokia, Illinois, at the bar and restaurant that my wife had, and we had extensive conversation that whole weekend. He came in Friday evening and didn't leave out until Sunday evening, and a lot of conversation, a lot of talk. But Barbara's right. He was at the point where he was wanting to make some different plans, and that would have been a big payday, like probably he had never seen. But he also knew that he couldn't trust him, and it could have been detrimental to him.
Right.
So, yeah, it was. I tell you, it could have been. Terry would not have been happy. I can tell you.
Yeah.
No.
I would have.
I mean, I got excited sitting there that
I
Saturday
pay to
night.
see that match.
Victoria, I got it. I'll never forget. We're sitting around the table in the back of the bar room, and when I'm telling you, I am literally like I'm at Christmas. Santa Claus was delivering all the presents. I'm sitting there listening,
Right?
and I'm thinking, oh, there's no. Everybody else would give the right eye to sit here like I am. Yeah, I'm just taking it all in. I mean, I'm like a sponge. Just give
Well,
it.
on one hand, you have this ego-ridden, muscle-bound
Steroidal
dumbass,
freak.
Freakazoid.
right? And then you've got Frank. I would,
Say no
oh,
more. Say no more.
right? You know?
I mean, a guy that could go out there on his work day. I think Lee Ferris said it best about Terry. He doesn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch.
Wristwatch, yeah.
Well,
Uh,
that's what I say about some of the women that are wrestling from 87 till now. They don't know a headlock from a hammerlock.
yeah, no, it's altogether different. And but I mean, and I remember Larry and I, gosh, with everything that because I mean, and a lot of people didn't know this, but after Frank's demise, I got out of it for about a year. I was just that so
Devastated. Yeah.
yeah.
Devastated. I can
And,
only imagine.
and Larry, there was a few people. Larry, of course, one. He pulled me out of it and said, "Come on, this. You think what Frank would want us to continue to do." And when I got
Right.
back into it, uh, and we were on fire at that time because I mean, uh, but we often said, "Man, if Frank was still with us, uh, what we could have accomplished." I'm telling you.
Absolutely correct.
I mean, even to this day, with the knowledge and with the connections that he would have had, and I am amazed. I tell Darla this all the time. I'm amazed when I go to Vegas or I go up to Waterloo, Iowa, or down to Tennessee here recently. Uh, hell, I got more people coming up wanting me to sign autographs than some of these young wrestlers do. And I tell my wife, I said, I don't know these people. And she reminds me, well, there's nobody. A few years ago, I couldn't say social media, and now I live on social media. Uh,
I'm right there with you. I cannot believe I was in the business. I was around the business 8 years, but I was a professional wrestler for a little less than 4 years,
right.
from my first match to my last match. And it literally shocked me when I got on social media that people remembered who the hell I was.
I mean, how many people do you know that sits up at 1 o'clock in the morning posting pictures of Darla and Barbara?
I mean, this morning, all
Right?
the pictures you posted this.
Only
Oh
her.
my gosh, memories.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying, you got to keep the fans interacted. And
Right.
today, I mean, I check
I
my
tell,
messages and then I'd go back and there'd be 40, 50 people hit on those pictures and leaving
yep,
comments and they love it. And that's why I said when I go down to Tennessee, people say, oh, Mr. Simmons, we follow you, everything you do, them old matches that you put out there. And it makes me feel good. But, I'm probably the biggest mark ever.
me,
I mean,
yeah,
I like Jerry Briscoe. He says it the best. He says, hell, I mark out about 20 times a week, He said,
right.
because especially when he was still working with WWE, he watched them all the time. But,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't, but I love keeping up with the old school. I interviewed Rip Rogers a few weeks back, and I mean, what a story
How is he doing?
doing crazy as ever. In fact,
Yeah.
when we started
We just released a documentary last week with him. We did last year down in
when I
Vegas.
started my interview with him, he said, well, Herb, he says, I want to let you know I brought my not so much profanity with me today because, he can talk like a sailor.
Oh,
And, but, there's a guy that really, if you listen to his story, he never wanted to be a big superstar. He wanted to just be a worker. He
Right.
didn't care if he won, he lost. He didn't care any about. He just wanted to go do his work.
That's what's missing today.
Yes.
When I went in the ring, I'd rather get the snot beat out of me and flip flop on the mat than run ropes. It was
Yeah.
so much easier just turning over,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? You know, it. The old saying, it doesn't matter who wins, it's how you play the game.
Well,
Did those fans walk out that door and feel their money was well spent? It's not about who goes over or who does a job. It's about the fans, and that's what people have forgotten. This
well,
is what these promoters and wrestlers have forgotten today.
you said it a little earlier, Victoria. Our society has been uh, driven good against evil. I mean, look at what's going on in 2020 in our country.
Oh
And
my God.
in the wrestling business, people want to see good against evil. And
Yes.
that's what I try telling my side of the locker room, the babies. Well, I don't want to get beat up tonight. I said, do you realize the sympathy that you get when you get beat up? When that heel is kicking your ass out there and that crowd is cheering for you.
Right.
Said,
And they're
that ought to make
begging. They're begging you to get up.
yes,
You know?
and then the comeback is the payday.
Right.
And some of them just don't understand the psychology of that. But it takes people to teach them that, and that's why I have Bob Orton running my Ace Academy. And you, I don't know how well I know Barbara. You've been around him a little bit, but Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. is a guy. He's a man of few words, but a lot of action. And
Guys, I hate to interrupt, but my sister just came in. We have a horse colicking.
Oh yeah,
And I gotta go. I'm sorry. I
it's all
apologize
good.
to everybody. I have to. Can we
Go.
please do this again, Sean?
Yeah, we can. We
With
can
these
do another one.
people, I
Yeah.
have had such a good time, but I have got to go. I've
No
got to go
problem.
help my sister. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
Love
all
you,
good.
babe. Talk to you soon.
I
good.
love you, girl.
Good to see you. Bye.
Good to see you, Miss Barbara. Bye, guys.
Take care,
Bye.
See ya.
So, Sean,
I'm-
how did
I'm
you
in
tell
the
him you
middle
had a
of cooking
special guest
pizza,
tonight?
so excuse me.
No.
I'm back and forth. Sam has just come back from a gig. He's done a double because I got Biketoberfest here. So
Oh.
he's worked twice. So I'm in the middle of getting him a pizza while I'm talking. So I'm listening. Even when I'm not here, I can hear you.
Oh,
So,
you're fine.
So, Barbara,
Hi,
will you do me a
Sam.
favor and tell Sam I said hello?
I will.
I get to listen to him every now and then when he's doing a little music when you're videoing it, but I want to get down there and go to a live show.
Yeah, there hasn't been much work because of the virus, of course. So
I know.
now we've got, which it was meant to be cancelled, but the bikes are in town, so there's
Well,
a few venues that are open.
I don't know if Darla told you, but we're planning on coming down next month.
Good.
Is that luncheon still on, Darla?
Yeah. Yes.
When I talked to Brian the other day, he said it was.
Yes, it's still on. And in fact, Bob Cook announced it. I don't know if it was Sunday or Monday. He put it out on Facebook.
But it's not open to the general public, though. Right?
No.
No.
Only wrestlers and special invitees.
Oh, so are you going to make sure we get invited?
That's not even
Of course
a question.
I will. That's silly. And it also, and I forgot to mention this to Barbara earlier when we talked, but it was also announced that Frank is being honored.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
you
I
weren't aware of that?
wasn't going to say anything because I didn't know if she knew or not.
I didn't.
Oh, well, it was announced on Facebook.
Yeah,
I
they're
didn't
gonna.
even
Oh.
see it.
I didn't
Yeah.
either.
Yep, but they announced it, so that's why I told Mickey. I said I want to come down and see Barb and meet. I feel like I know Sam. Well, I've seen him for so much now, but I like to meet him in person. And of course, then that other girl, what's her name? Darla. She's supposed to be there.
Who?
Darla.
Oh,
Yeah.
that girl.
Yeah, that
I
girl.
can't wait
Remember?
to get my toes in the sand.
I
Well,
Hey,
hey,
Barbara,
hopefully you're
aren't you guys
compatible.
pretty much open down there now, though?
Yes, we're pretty much open. It's I don't go to any indoors. I'm still being very
me,
careful.
so
I
are
mean,
we.
you can't live in fear, but you can't give up life. But I'm still very careful of where I go and everything, just because you just don't know.
Well,
You know,
let
you
me
hear
tell you.
about them talking, and then you realize we're of the age group. I
Let
was
me tell
like,
you. I've
you know,
lost. We've lost 7 friends to it.
oh my gosh.
And with my day job, this was my 216th day of working it through the county. And every day we do a briefing at 3:30 with our numbers, our positivity rate, and
Oh no.
the entire country is on an incline on a spike again. The New
That's
York
what's
Times,
scary. Yeah. And
the New
as I
York
said,
Times,
especially when people are going into when the cold weather is coming and everybody's put them back inside again.
and
Here,
I
at least in Florida, anywhere I go is open. It's outdoors. It's by the beach or it's by the river, and
right,
it's open venues, and you can kind of stay away from a lot of the people that you're not in a crowded group
right,
or anything. And I won't go inside because the bars are open again, and that's just a hot spot. Just because, well, people have a few drinks and everything else goes out the window. Don't think.
Yeah.
well, and
Yeah.
that's why people didn't understand. Like up here, our bars and restaurants were closed to outside dining only, and people were complaining, "Well, why? That doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
You can go to the Walmart store, but you can't go to a restaurant." Well, I tried to explain to them, I can go in a Walmart store and walk down an aisle and pass people. I'm not buying for 10 or 15 minutes. I'm
Yes.
not sitting there singing and drinking and talking loud. And I said, so just use some common sense. But yeah, we've had 200 as of today, 208 residents of our county that's died from it, and
Wow.
Wow.
so it's there. And of
It's
course, all
real.
these conspiracy theory people will say, "Oh, the day after the election, it's all going to be gone."
I
Well,
know.
here's my question to them, and I've been interviewed by every St. Louis news station about it. I tell them, if this virus is politically motivated, I'm joining that political group because it's the smartest SOBs that I know. Because how does this virus know what my political affiliation is? It
Right.
doesn't know if I'm Democrat, Republican, Independent. It only knows that if it wants me, it's going to come and knock on my door.
And it's all around the world. I mean, it's
Yes,
from one end of the world to the other end into New Zealand. I mean, from
yes,
London, New Zealand, and everywhere in between.
yeah,
So,
it's
I
everywhere.
mean,
And
it's
then they
real.
say, well, it's just the flu. And I say, but wait a minute. Yeah, the flu kills people. But the difference between COVID-19 and the flu is I just got my vaccine today for my flu shot. There's no vaccine for this COVID yet.
No, they haven't
And
found
yeah,
that.
so we're probably going to hear about COVID for the rest of our life, but hopefully there will be a vaccine for it, like the flu vaccine.
Yeah, I
So,
think life has changed from how we knew it. This point
oh,
going
yes.
on.
I think what you've seen now, people have realized, companies realize that they can have people work from home and still get
Right,
productivity out of them. You know,
right.
people, your McDonald's and them that aren't opening up their dining rooms, they're saving money.
Hmm.
Uh, they're making just as much money through the drive-through as they was when they had the indoor dining opened up.
Yeah, because
So
you'll
yeah,
see the line. The
I
line
agree
is,
with you. I think there's an enormous. Well, listen, I got to get off of here too. I
yeah, I
really. How
know.
did you tell him?
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Did you tell him you had a surprise tonight? Is that what it was?
No, no, I didn't. I
Oh,
You're
just
the surprise. You were the
we were just
surprise.
sitting here talking, and I said, "Oh, by the way, since you guys are all from St. Louis," I said, "Hang on just a second," and then I brought you in.
I
oh,
had no
okay.
clue.
Well,
But
Boy, as soon as he said St. Louis, I said, I hope it's Herb. It's got to be Herb.
well, I tell you what, you've really made my night. Like I said, even though we talk on the social media every now and then or on the phone, it's always a pleasure. My lovely wife is sitting here listening to us tonight.
tell
Uh,
her to poke her head in there.
he said, poke your head in there. Can you see him?
Again.
See her?
Hi,
Hey.
Mickey.
Hi,
Love
Mickey.
you.
Love you.
And of
See
course,
you soon, hopefully.
come here, Brody. Brody, heel. Come here.
Oh, where's
Come here.
Brody?
Oh my
Come here,
gosh,
Brody.
I haven't seen Brody for a long
Come here.
time.
Come here. I'm going to show you Brody. Come on. See who's on there. See that?
Hi,
See,
Brody.
up here.
Oh,
Aw.
Oh.
hi, Brody.
Sit. Can you sit? Yeah, that's my best buddy right there.
I remember Brody when he was a puppy. He didn't stay a puppy very long.
No, and I tell you, he's
That wasn't a Mickey.
he's a Frank all over. Believe me. Sometimes he listens to me, but with Mama, he gets a little stubborn.
He's rowdy.
Yeah, he went to the beauty shop today and got all cleaned up and everything.
Oh,
All right on.
So, but no, you really, I was when Sean asked me if I'd be available. I said, if you remind me, as long as my mind gets wandering. But when he told me he had you coming on, I said I got to make all the arrangements to be on there.
Aw.
This has been fun.
Nice. It was so nice seeing you.
Yeah, thanks, Herb.
Anytime, just give me a call. All right, you girls take care. Love yous.
You too. Love you.
Herb.
Bye bye.
Love you
Thanks
too.
again.
Mickey.
Love you, Darla, too. Sean, thank you. That was
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Sean. I need to get going too. I gotta get
Yep.
up at 5 o'clock in the
I know.
morning to go to work.
pizza in the oven.
Yeah, and Sam's probably wanting to spend some time, especially since he worked a double. But thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
All right.
Anytime.
Talk to
We'll
you
do this
soon.
again soon. All right, guys.
Take
All right.
care. Bye,
All right.
Darla. Love you.
Bye. Love you too, Barbara.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. That was a very great, long conversation with some legends of wrestling right there. Tune in next week, and I believe our guest is going to be Nikita Brezhnikov. I'm not quite sure. I'll know more tomorrow or the next day. Check our social media page. Until then, this is Sensational out.